Hey folks, my name is Girish Bally, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week. Today we're going to be talking to a person that I've talked to a couple of weeks back, maybe a week back, and we had a great time chit-chatting, understanding who he is and who's not. We'll get into that basics of that, but we know what he's today. He's an author, and we're going to talk about mystery stuff, and we're going to talk about the whole process of that whole book, of how he made that book, and then what he did back before he did the author stuff. So we'll get into the basics of a little of that, but basically more on the author side of things and how he is doing today. So Rick, how are you? And thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
Oh, I'm great, Garish. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for coming on the show. But before we get into the basics of all the stuff that you do or don't do, and we'll talk about the little stuff behind the wall over there, what you have there. But what does back to basic mean to you?
Oh, back to basic means to me forgetting a lot of the fluff and just getting down to what it is that's the core of what makes things work.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And Rick, you mentioned a whole bunch of sentence and paragraph when I asked you what that back to basics is, and I won't say anything on there. That's a big long line, but I will put that in the show notes in the description of the episode of that. So whenever that releases. So thank you again, Rick, for explaining that. Uh, so let's talk about you, if you don't mind, before we get into the book. You had a really long journey of what you did back in the time, and then you also were um, Grammy Award nominee also. So can you explain who you are and what you are? Because I know who you are, but apparently a lot of people don't. So let's talk about the back in the scenes, if you don't mind.
Sure, I don't mind at all. Actually, I had a parallel life, if you will, parallel tracks going my whole life between music and literature.
Hmm.
And I wrote and published a sports newspaper when I was 12 years old. And at the same time, I was writing songs and playing in rock bands. And this was in the very early days of rock and roll in the mid 50s. I wrote a play when I was 15. I went to film school and wrote student films while I was there. But I also had a business mind in addition to the creativity of playing music, singing, writing songs, writing various things. I was always the leader of my bands and the guy who worked with the agents and the managers. So I kind of just transitioned. Then I became a record producer. And as you said, I got a Grammy nomination for a record I produced. Another record that I produced popularized whistles and discotheques.
Hmm.
And another one was used as a Coca-Cola commercial, and another was used by the National Football League. So, I mean, I've produced over 50 albums, but at the same time, I was working as an executive in a record company or various record companies.
Hmm.
So I kind of was using right brain, left brain. And
Hmm.
while all of this was going on, I was also writing nonfiction in the form of newspaper columns and
Hmm.
magazine and newspaper articles.
Hmm.
So, kind of my career path was, as I said, this almost triple path of executive, music, and writing and publishing.
Hmm.
And what happened was I was ended up being a senior executive in the music industry, worked with a lot of hit acts and film soundtracks and things like that. And then I retired and I went into doing nonprofit work on the boards of directors of a number of organizations.
Hmm.
And then my next door neighbor uh, was a poet. And she knew I had told her that I had done some writing, nonfiction in my life. She said, "Why don't you join the writing group that I'm part of?" And this was back in like 2000, I want to say 5 or 6.
Hmm.
And I said, "Sure, sounds like fun." I believe you should try everything in life as long as it's legal and safe. You
Sure.
know, I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
I'll take a shot at it. Why not?
Sure.
It's part of life's adventure. And so I joined the group. and I started writing fiction for the really the first time. And I started writing short stories. And in fact, my book, the Pignone Scorpion book, was originally one of the short stories I wrote for that group. That was the genesis of the book. And then about 10 years later, now going to about 2016, no, actually I go back, it was 2007. So it was around the same era. I'm confusing dates. A friend of mine came down from Portland, and he came here to Ashland, Oregon, where I live, to license a product to Blackstone Audio, which was one of the largest audiobook companies at the time. He happened to own the rights to Winnie the Pooh. So he came down here, licensed it. And while he was meeting with the people at Blackstone, he told them about me and my wife, who used to be a senior executive in the industry, as music industry as well, and said, you should meet my friends. They might be able to add something to your company. And the next week, Deborah and I had lunch with Craig Black, who was the founder and owner of Blackstone. And he said, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with you, but I think I need your knowledge. And he hired us as consultants. We went on his first board of directors. Then Deborah retired. I joined the company, and I've been head of new business development for the publisher, which is now a full publishing company ever since. And I'm writing, and I've written the Pignone Scorpion book. I just finished the second book in the series. I've got a book. I have a short story in a anthology of mystery short stories that's coming out in May. And I've written newspaper and magazine articles recently, and I just find that I'm having a hell of a time.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So, I was going to go and question you, but it looks like it's not an alien word or alien question. Going from what you used to do, okay, and getting into an author, I was going to ask you, is this an alien job for you? But apparently you've been doing article writing and well, a little different, right? I guess it is a little different, but I guess your practice of writing was kind of there. I think that this was your calling, or was what you did before was a calling? What do you think?
I think it's both, actually, and I've been able to combine them. For example, I co-wrote a science fiction rock opera in the late 60s that almost got produced by Robert Stigwood, who was the man that produced Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar and Saturday Night Fever. And he chose to do Evita over my rock opera. I'm okay with that, because to lose out to Evita is okay.
Sure.
But there I was combining music and writing, because I wrote, the script, the lyrics, the music, etc. And in fact, I'm in the process of updating that, and my agent's going to be going out and showing it probably to some of the streaming services, because it's as viable today really as it was then. So I think my calling was always some form of creativity combined with some form of business. And I don't ever remember not reading and not writing. My father read a book every single night of his life. And he and my mother taught me the love of literature, the love, and they schooled me in it. And, I started with the Hardy Boys, and, I went through Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Chester Himes. I also loved sci-fi, Asimov and Clarke and others. So, but I find that I write mystery better than I write. I've tried my hand at some of the other genres, and I don't think I'm as adept at them as I am at mystery.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rick, for explaining that and how the transition kind of changed, but it kind of didn't, did it? Because you were kind of doing the same thing, kind of, but just in a different format, that is. So let's talk about the book, if you don't mind. But you know what? Let me ask you this one quick question right before the book. There was a show on Hulu, if I'm not mistaken, the Murder in the Building, where Steve Martin. So what are your thoughts on that? I think you relate a little to that whole plot of that show or movie, whatever you want to call it.
Well, I enjoyed that show. It was Martin Short and Selena Gomez and Steve Martin, right? And I loved it for a number of reasons. First of all, as my book is set in a barbershop, that book is set in an apartment building.
That's right.
It's a very unique, most mysteries are not set wholly in apartment buildings.
Exactly.
It also, similarly to my book, was kind of more of a cozy mystery. It was not filled with a lot of blood and guts and horror and angst. So I really related to the show. I thought the characters were fun. They were humorous. I don't know how else to say it. I could have easily seen that be something that I could have potentially written, in the sense that I bonded with it. It felt very familiar to me, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'm sorry when it did.
Yeah. So, thank you again for that. The reason why I asked this question is because this was placed in the building and yours is placed in the barbershop. But usually these movies or show or even a book doesn't really place in that area, does it? So now let's get into your book, if you don't mind. So how did it all start? Do you think the story came first to you or the title came first to you?
It definitely the story. In fact, the title may have been the last thing that came to me.
Okay.
I originally had just thought of a title of the Pignon-Scorbian case files, sort of like a Sherlock Holmes case files, but I just realized that wasn't that snappy. So I just realized before this book went to press, it was going to have a better title. I just didn't know what it would be until the very end. Wow, the way I write is I am a full pantser. I just sit at a computer and a story plays out in my head like a movie. And my job is to sit at the keyboard and type out what I'm seeing in my head so that I capture it for a potential reader to see on paper what I'm seeing playing out. And the Scorbian, as I said, it started as a short story. I did not have character names. The only thing I had when it started, which was what I saw in my head, was that it took place around the turn of the century, early 1900s, 1910, in a small town in England. Probably because I loved so many English murder mysteries, it just felt natural to me. And I like that era. It's the Downton Abbey era. So, Father Brown and Downton Abbey, and it just all felt good to me. And so this started playing out. And then all of a sudden, I don't know where it came from, but I started writing that Scorbian, the protagonist, whose name I didn't have, was going to be of Egyptian and Haitian heritage, of an Egyptian father and a Haitian mother. And so I said, okay, that's cool. I mean, we'll end up that he ends up in England, but let's start him on a different track. Let's make him a little more exotic. And so I started doing a ton of research. I did research into Haiti. I did research, obviously, into England, into Egypt. And in the book, I do tell the backstory of his father and his mother and how they met and how they each grew up. And then I realized I needed a name for the character. So I started researching Egyptian surnames and family names, I should say. And this name Scorbian came up. And I really liked it because it was similar to Scorpion.
Scorpion,
so it wasn't that disfamiliar. It didn't feel totally foreign. And it had a nice ring to it. And it kind of stood for, in its language, entrepreneurship and adventurousness. And that described his father. Then I found out through research that there was a valley and a mountain in Haiti called Pignon. And that's where I had his mother living and where she and his father met. So I thought, wow, that'd be kind of cool to ceremoniously name their child after the place that they met. And then I said, wow, Pignon-Scorbian. I like the ring of that. It's sort of like Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot. It's not your everyday, excuse me for all the Joe Smiths out there, but it's not a Joe Smith, if you will. So I said, wow, I like this. And that's how he became Pignon-Scorbian.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you again. I kind of knew that was from Haiti, and I had a feeling that it was something to do with the surname. Not that I asked you before. I was
Right.
just guessing on my head. And I'm glad that you said that because I think that's what you were trying to do. So thank you again. So now, why the barbershop?
The best answers I can give you on the barbershop are twofold. One, it came to me. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know where it came from, but it was there in my head. And the characters from the barbershop, the barbers, the shoot, they were all there. I saw them.
Hmm.
But the other thing is, especially in olden days,
Hmm.
the barbershop was a community meeting place.
That's right.
You know, it's where people met and exchanged gossip, and it was more than just a place where you had your hair cut or got a shave or your shoes shined.
Right.
So it was a natural environment, if you will, to have events happen and people come to. And
Hmm.
so I just thought it was kind of unique. There have been cozy mysteries set in beauty parlors and beauty salons, but I don't remember very many in a male barber shop. So I
Hmm.
just thought, wow, I'm going to go with it. And I like the way it turned out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you again for that. The more and more I'm listening to you about understanding the dissecting, how you got the character, the last name, where they fell in love, and how they ended up, and the barber having a gossip place, and all that fun stuff. Does this sound more of a TV show versus a movie? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, were you thinking that this might be a movie or this might be a TV show?
Well,
What are
I
your
was
thoughts?
okay. First of all, since it played out in my head like a movie, I that the first thing I actually witnessed with it was a movie like playing out in my head.
Hmm.
So it was natural to me to write it. And a number of people who have reviewed it, read it, and reviewed it, the public, have said, I can't wait to see this as a movie or a
That's
TV show.
hmm.
And so, yes, I absolutely can see it as such. And in fact, I will tell you, I'm not sure that this is known anywhere, but we've just entered into an option agreement with a UK production company who is hoping to turn it into a TV show or a movie. So my fingers are crossed.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you again. The more and more it does me personally, I would love to see a TV show versus a movie. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, everyone has their own opinion. The reason why I say that is because you can dissect the characters and you can place them really nicely. Because in a movie, I think you're going to play it within 2, 3 hours. It'll be so much in that 3 hours, 2 hours to put in there. So that's just my 2 cents, and that's I'm no director, but at least that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, I
Now,
I can't disagree with you necessarily. So
yeah,
go,
yeah, yeah,
let's hope.
yeah, yeah. So thank you again for that, Rick. Now, what is the process now? Because now you have done so much. You've done the book, and you might be getting a movie or a TV show, and you're doing a second part, and the third one, and maybe the fourth one, and the fifth one. But what else is there for Rick for the next 5 years?
Well, certainly there's that. There's no question. I mean, I'm certainly hoping that this book and the follow up, the second book, which by the way will be called Murder in Haxford, which is the
Hmm.
town that it takes place in. I certainly hope that they do well enough that the publisher asks me to do a third book.
Hmm.
However, as I said, I have a story in this anthology called Hotel California. It's the
Hmm.
first book in a series called Murder and Music,
Yeah.
and it's an anthology of mystery short stories. And in that anthology, and I've signed up, by the way, not just for the first one, but for the second one, which should be called Thriller, and the third one, which would be called Back in Black, based on the AC/DC album.
Hmm.
So, but in that book, as opposed to writing a historical fiction type story, I've
Hmm.
written a story with that's contemporary, with
Hmm.
a character who is a New York City premier hitman who
Hmm.
has a hit put on his life
Hmm.
and escapes the hit, escapes to Hawaii, and plays a cat and mouse game of trying to kill the hit person sent after him before they get him. So it's a totally different it's still kind of a cozy in that there's not a lot of blood and guts in it, but it's contemporary and it's a different type of a mystery. And I think that character, his name's Walker, no relation to any other Walkers. I think that he'll continue through this anthology and might turn into a book himself. And as I also said, I'm still working on the sci-fi rock opera, which is called The Eye of Jupiter. And it's sort of, the way I could describe that is it's Star Wars. If Star Wars was a musical, that's kind of what it would be. You know, I mean, it's kind of a send-up sci-fi fantasy with great music. So I'm working on that too, and I also have a pretty cool idea for a book that's involves a senior who helps other seniors when they're threatened by a gang of youths. So I'm thinking about starting that too. I've already actually started the third Scorpion book. I finished the second one, turning it in this week, and I've actually started the third one, and I really like where it's going.
Nice, Rick. It seems like you're doing so much, but it looks like you're enjoying the second phase of your life right now, aren't you?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, the operative word that I would use is fun.
Yeah.
I hope that I and the people around me are having fun in life and with what we do. And look, we live in very stressful times now, between the war and the socio-political environment and the economy and inflation, everything that's going on. It's pretty stressful out there. So it's not that easy always to have fun. And I think one great way to have fun is to escape into books and movies and TV shows and music and other forms of entertainment that can give you relief from the day-to-day stressors. So yeah, I'm having a ton of fun and I enjoy it. I enjoy the process and I'm enjoying what's going on.
Yeah, thank you again for that. Now, one more question, if you don't mind. Now, I know this is a mystery book, and I know that there'll be someone who's going to be a killer or even the victim or whatever the case is, right? But why is it always a hero that it becomes a villain or a murderer? Is it because a different twist, or or we just don't want to create a new character? What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I must say that I don't think in my book a hero becomes a villain.
Okay.
There are villains in the book. There's a very shady newspaper publisher, editor, who it really is not a very nice human being. But the people that kill and are killed, and there are I wouldn't call them heroes. I mean, there's a fortune seeker, there's a murder at a circus, and there's a crime of passion. I mean, the book has 3 crimes in it, all of which have a murder in it. But the people who do the murdering aren't heroes. Some of them are just average Joes, if you will. And some of them, actually more of them are just average Joes. One of them's a bit of a psychopath, but the others aren't.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right and wrong answer. It all depends on the storyline. But I just thought that I'll ask you a quirky question, because you know what? I just needed to understand a psychoanalysis from an author of what their thoughts are and how they dissect a character and what are their thought processes. So it was just a question from my dissecting.
If the reality is, the question you asked more fits the Walker character that I did for that anthology, because he was a hitman. He did kill people, and I had to find a way to make that real, but at the same time make people like him enough that they didn't want him dead. So, so it was a fine line between, hey, this guy kills people for a living, but at the same time, you're going to like him.
So, Rick, thank you again for being on my show. But before you leave today, just your thoughts on how our journey was on Back to Basics, and any last words for all the authors out there listening, and try to get some information from you of how to be an author, or what do you need to do, and any last words from your point of view.
Sure. If you don't mind, what I'd like to answer that by giving maybe some tips and advice that I've found as a writer and as a publisher, both.
Mhm.
Um, and that would be these to aspiring writers and authors. The
Mhm.
first thing is write. If you're going to be a writer, write and keep writing. That's what writers do. They write.
Mhm.
The second thing is have an idea of what your goal is, because the paths you go down could be very different depending on your goal. If you want your goal to be that you're going to be a full-time writer and this is going to be your career, you should be looking at it differently than if you just want to vanity publish and say, well, I've written some books, I don't really care who reads them. I want to just be able to say I'm a published author, and whoever does read them, so be it. That's a very different path than if you really want people to buy your book and know who you are, etc.
Mhm.
Another thing I would say is rejection is part of the life of anybody who is
Mhm.
in creative arts,
Mhm.
writing, painting, movie making, whatever. You can't let it get to you. If people write bad reviews, I mean, I remember that Stieg Larsson's book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, there
Mhm.
was a critic who wrote, and I may be paraphrasing or I may be actually quoting it, this is the worst book I've ever read.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
It happens. Live with it. Don't let it throw you for a loop. In fact, ignore it. Don't even read them. Have a belief in yourself. You don't need to read what other people think. Um, Decide whether you want to be published or self-published or traditional published, because they're very different roads to go down. And if you're going to do traditional publishing, uh, you've got to write a really really great query letter to get an agent, and because most publishers do not accept submissions without agents attached to them, and the best way to write a good query letter is to research the agents and find out who represents the genre you're writing in, find out something about them and write a letter to them that lets them know that you took the time to actually find out who they were and personalize it to them. And I guess the last thing I would say is if you have writer's block, walk away from it for a while and
Mhm.
then come back to it. And when you come back to it, I think one of two things is going to happen. Either you'll have clarity on, oh, this is where to go with it, where you couldn't see that before. Or
Mhm.
you're going to look at it and go, I know why I couldn't go anywhere. This isn't good. Let me
Mhm.
go to something new.
Mhm.
That would be my suggestions.
Yeah. Rick, thank you. Thank you again for coming on the show and making this brighter and supporting me on my small podcast here. And we'll keep in touch, of course, offline. And because you're a great help for sure. And I'll, get your book too, and I'll get you sign it, and we'll
Great.
make that happen. So thank you again for that.
May I hold it up so people can see the book cover?
Yes, please, please.
This is it, Pino and Scorpion and the Barbershop Detectives. Uh, love the cover. And thank you. I'm glad to be here. Anytime you want to talk in depth about anything else, be happy to come on again. And I appreciate your supporting me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Rick, I will be dissecting you about other topics, and hopefully you will
Great.
be back on Back to Basics. And it's such a pleasure for you to be on the show. So thank you again for coming here.
Oh, my pleasure. Believe me, now that I'm 77 and a debut author, I hope I can inspire other seniors.
Absolutely, absolutely, for sure. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming.
Well, my pleasure.
So, guys, we spoke with Rick today, and we talked about the basics of writing and being an author. Early author or senior author, that's up to you to decide what you want to do. Now, he did say you're going to make mistakes on the way, but you know what? That's okay. That's part of life, isn't it? And he was only talking about being an author. What about you being an entrepreneur? Or what about you being in the corporate life? You are going to make mistakes. That's okay. Just keep on going forward. Now, as usual, as always, there's a quote of the day from Back to Basics. And I hope my guest, my Rick, will understand and will like this quote. And here's the quote of the day: killing is not so easy as the innocent believe. And that's from Harry Potter. Hopefully, Well, that's kind of true, kind of, right? Okay. So, as usual, as always, what do I always say at my end of my episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless. Keep on commenting on all my episodes, including today, because it will help me in the long run. With your support and love, I will be there as far as I can. And there are three things, including this episode and every episode, makes it a hit for me, that is, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. Guys, take care. God bless. And I will see you next week on Back to Basics. And if you are live here on Back to Basics, they will be live happening in 2 days. It'll be 9:30 a.m. Eastern, and there'll be another one at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about automation AI, and we'll be talking about entrepreneurship at 3 p.m. So please stay tuned. Please listen to me and stay tuned. God bless. Bye bye. So we're going to